Hello and welcome to my channel. I'm Mikhail Peters. I honestly really did not feel like recording today, but I was like, whatever, I'm just gonna get it together and try to do it. I'm finally worrying about an assignment that I have for my PhD that's due next week, and I'm really determined to finish that by the end of the day today, so that was part of why I was thinking to not record, but I was like, whatever, I'm gonna do it, because I had some sort of ruminating thoughts that I was like, you know what, I'll just talk about it on YouTube. And maybe this isn't the best thing to make a video about because I do feel like it's very negative and people actually are drawn to negative information. However, not necessarily in this context. It's more of like the bad news is good news kind of thing. But today I wanted to talk about, similar to how I already talked about making more mistakes, but I want to talk about the importance of allowing your children to make mistakes, because I think this is something that's often overlooked. And in fact, I started thinking a lot about this book, which I had my book club book with over the summer, and there is actually a section in here where she talks about having to let her kids make mistakes, even though it is so uncomfortable for her. And it's true, it really is hard to watch other people make mistakes, but one of the things that I've learned about my own mistakes that I've made is that I would not have had the insight and understanding if I had not made those mistakes. So when I see people doing some pretty whack things and I'm like, why are they doing that? Sometimes I actually understand if it's something that I myself also made that poor mistake in. And one of the things, Diesel wants to be with me, come here. My bed is not made today. Okay, here's the puppy. Hello. Oh. I love the puppy. Okay. Alright, as I was saying. So, it can be hard to watch your kids make mistakes. Yes, this is what I was getting at. And I totally lost my train of thought when I picked up the puppy. Hold on a second. Okay, here we go. So, the more business YouTube I listen to, the more money YouTube, whatever, the more I learn that everything about becoming financially successful has a lot to do with making mistakes up front, and people discuss those mistakes, but it is one of those things that you have to go through those until you understand what that feels like. I'm going to give an example. Hiring contractors to do work that you don't have time for. While it can save time and it can actually be smart in a financial sense, sometimes if you hire the wrong person, it can cost you a lot more time, effort, and money, really, in the end. And I thought about having my mattress business in Finland. And the first time that I started the mattress business, I made a fatal error in who I hired. And it wasn't necessarily like, a big deal, because it was more of like, okay, whatever profits we get, we're going to split. It wasn't like I was like out here paying these people, right? So again, it's like a very mini problem or error that I made, but still one that I learned from. So then I realized I need to hire more reliable, less emotionally fickle people when it comes to business, because business is not about emotions. It's not about being friends with people. It's about making money. Okay. So it's cool to go into business with your friends. It's actually why a lot of people will say you shouldn't go into business with your friends, because it can become tricky in that sense, but it is something to keep in mind. So business is an area where you have to make mistakes to learn from them, and whether it's with hiring people, that's one I've listened to recently, or you're just not familiar with the way that things are going to go down if X, Y, and Z happens, like this sort of negative thing happens. But either way, you have to a lot of times go through that process, make some mistakes in order to be able to learn from those mistakes. Now, I think one of the other important, it's really funny that you can't see his little face. One of the other important things to keep in mind with making mistakes is what may be perceived as a mistake to one person may not necessarily be perceived as a mistake by another person. So this comes down to priorities, responsibilities, values. Like, there are too many things that go into individual decision making to be able to call out and point out that person made a mistake, because if that person does not feel that they made a mistake, did they really make a mistake? This is getting too philosophical. This is like, if a tree falls in the forest and nobody heard it, did it actually fall? So yeah, this kind of thing. And so why am I talking about this today? I'm talking about this because one of the revolving issues that I have had for the last year with my dad is that I really want to buy U.S. property. And he's very, very opposed to this. He's like, you need to wait. The market isn't good right now. And you should just rent until then. And he's like, if I had bought my house 2 years after, and I was like, well, you probably wouldn't have bought your house 2 years after because it would have already been sold. And I'm sure there weren't really that many houses on the market during '08. Actually, I should fact check myself with that. I shouldn't make assertions like that. But the whole like, oh, we're expecting a recession, we're expecting a recession, we're expecting a recession. I don't know. Maybe we are. Maybe we aren't. Like, nobody can predict the future. So it's kind of hard. And my mom calls this the what if game. And she talks about how stupid it is to play the what if game. And, you know, I kind of agree with her. So I'm like, this doesn't change the fact that I want to own a home. And my dad is like, you know, not understanding why. And I'm like, you owned a home at my age. A lot of other people in our family, let's say, owned a home at my age. So I have a hard time understanding what you don't understand about wanting to own a home. And I like living in a home. One of the other issues, and so this is interesting if you're listening to this from a non-US perspective, as I know some of my viewers do, at least those who watch my English videos, because I know that segment's very small. But in the US, one of the issues a lot of times, unless you're in like a luxury apartment, is that living in apartments can be very sketchy. So if you want to be directly around and involved in a lot of criminal, drug, negative, violent activity, whatever, go live in an apartment. That's not how the rest of the world works. So I understand that it is very like confusing to like think about the fact that that's the reality of life in the US, but like unfortunately it kind of is. Like we lived in an apartment for like a year or two with my dad, and there was like domestic violence constantly happening below me. And as a kid who was like 10 years old, this really freaked me out. And my dad's like, go live in those apartments. I'm like, yeah, after dealing with that as a kid, no thanks. Like, I'm really not gonna do that. But I think one of the issues I'm starting to have now is I'm kind of in the situation where, like, where I'm going to live right now was not a decision that was made by me. It was a decision that was made by both of my parents, and my parents aren't even married, right? So, like, I think one of the hard things for me being in the US is just like, oh, I know better. And it's like, do you really know better for me kind of thing? And so I'm explaining to my dad, like, there's so much intrinsic value of waking up and feeling like a sense of pride every day that you own your house. And he's like, pride is like a bad emotion. And I'm like, no, it's not like pride because you think that, like, oh, other people need to, like, look at me favorably because I did this thing. It's like, I looked this up today. I'm gonna look this up again. I looked up why am I so obsessed with owning a house, because I love the existential Google of the day. And it says that people often become obsessed with owning a home because it represents a significant life milestone, signifying stability, personal accomplishment, a sense of belonging to a community, and the ability to build equity and wealth, which can be psychologically powerful and contribute to a feeling of security and control over one's life. Key reasons for this obsession: stability and security. Ding, 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 we have a winner. That's what it is for me, okay? I have lived a very unstable life, moved around a lot. My parents got divorced really young. My parents were in the process of getting divorced for a really long time. And all these things contribute to me constantly feeling like I did not have a sense of stability. So the fact that, like, I have been in this household, even though it's very hard for me, it is one place and it gives me a sense of stability. So I want to move from this household to another household. I don't want to move 5 million times. I already did that. I've probably lived with 30 to 50 different people. I could literally count. Like, we could go through that if you're really interested. But yes, so owning a home provides a place to live. Unlike renting, where you might face rent evictions. Yes, I don't never want to be evicted from my house again, okay? That's what I'm going through right now, and I don't like it. Personal, well, that's a strong way of putting it, but personal expression and customization, don't care about that. Community building, don't care about that. Financial benefits, yes. Owning a home can be seen as an investment, allowing you to build equity over time and potentially generate wealth through property appreciation. Yes. Social status. In many societies, owning a home is considered a sign of success. I don't give a crap if people think about that. Psychological factors: exciting, anticipation, achieving a major life goal. Yes, okay. So all those things. Yes, my dad's like, oh, you know, you're caring what people think. No, I do not care what other people think. I just care about being in a house because in the US, I like being in a house. Okay? So whatever. So it doesn't matter how many times I try to explain this to my dad. He does not get it because he is not me. And he's like, you're making a major mistake if you're buying a house, blah, 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 because there was this whole thing where, like, my stepmom had bought a house and then she married my dad a few years later. I'm like, she didn't know she was going to marry you. I was like, and then he's like, you may meet somebody. I'm like, or I may not meet somebody, and then I'm going to be happy I have my own house. Okay? I mean, it's just like, you don't, and this gets into the what if game that my mom hates. Okay? So, it's just like, it's very frustrating that, like, my dad's like, I'm not going to let my children go buy a house and then be paying this much money in property taxes every year. And I'm just like, he can try to control whatever decisions I make, whatever. And actually, one of the things both my parents get upset with me about is before going after the apartment in Finland, I did not consult either of them. I consulted my grandparents, and that was it. And I was like, you know why? Because I didn't want to be talked out of that decision. So it might just get to this point where buying a house is something I do rather sneakily, and I just don't really tell my parents. Although my dad is really good at understanding construction stuff, so having him be the inspector would actually be useful. But I think the hard thing for me is I've spent my whole life seeking my dad's approval with every decision I've ever made, mostly because it's been very financially tied to him in a way. So how so? When I made the decision to go to NASA, let's say, or when I made the decision to go to Kyrgyzstan, or when I made the decision to go to Kyrgyzstan again, actually, no, when I went to Armenia, that was impulsive. I was just like, this costs $2,000. I have money for that. I'm throwing it at it. With Kyrgyzstan, there was some financial interdependence. The second time there wasn't, but I wasn't sure of that at the time that I applied. That was when I did a bunch of sneaky stuff, and I wasn't sneaky. It was totally fine, but it was just me getting money out of the university that they didn't want to give me. I'm like, come on guys, your endowment is huge, just give me my financial aid that I'm entitled to now that I'm 23 years old. Fun fact, if you're above the age of 23 in the US, FAFSA will stop considering your parents' income. So that's one life hack. If you want to get more money for your financial aid, just make sure you're studying at 23, which most people are not going to do because it's an opportunity cost because you could be working. So yes, all those fun things. So I just think it's one of these things where it's my dad is trying to control my decision, and he's like, oh, because it's going to be a mistake kind of thing. But I think it's really hard for him to determine if it's going to be a mistake. And it's yes, if I may struggle financially, that's going to be my problem, unless he's like, oh, I'm the one who's going to have to pick up the difference, so that will become my problem. Maybe this is what he's thinking. I don't really know. I can't really pretend to fully understand the way that other people think. This is a very important skill to recognize. But it is one of these things where, again, reading this book over the summer, it's even if it's hard to watch your kids make mistakes, you need to start letting your kids make mistakes from a young age, because it is one of these things where if you do not, they will not trust their own ability to reason through situations and make their own decisions. And then they will constantly be seeking the approval of other people and making decisions. And that is a very dangerous process, because then at that point, you don't really have your own sense of identity. You don't really know what your own internal values are. You don't have an inner voice almost. Well, it's too persuaded by the voices of people around you. So he quoted back to me today, you're the one who quotes the thing, wisdom comes through the counsel of many advisors, right? The scripture in the Bible. I'm like, yes, but still, understand that you at the end of the day are the end all be all, and you don't have to make a decision just because you will be approved. That decision will be approved by your parents. And this is actually something I'm pretty excited about when I eventually become a parent, because I really can't wait to try this. I can't wait to read all the things I'm supposed to do and not supposed to do, and then try it and see if it marginally minimizes the trauma that I'm going to bestow onto my future child. So that's what I'm thinking about today. But yeah, so it's hard. I get it. I can only imagine as a parent, it's probably hard to let your kids make mistakes. But it's if kids do not understand how to think through decisions, and that there are consequences to the actions, it's sort of kid touches hot stove, gets burned, realizes stove is hot, stops touching stove. But if the parent's there every single time to be don't touch it, don't touch it, don't touch it, they're never going to learn why they can't touch it. And I don't know about most people, but I've always had a very hard time listening to rules that I think are stupid and don't make sense. One of them, for example, was that I wasn't allowed to do my homework during school, which is what I did because I was never medicated for ADHD, right? So I had to learn how to look normal. And actually, to be very honest, it wasn't really even about how it looked. It was about I couldn't focus, and somehow switching rapidly between two activities at once allowed me to focus somehow. And I would get yelled at all the time. And so then I just got better at hiding it. So I'd hide my homework under the desk, and then they'd call me and I'd answer, because I'm still listening, and then I would go back to what I was doing. And at that point, if I'm still getting good grades and following along in class, what reason do you have to not allow me to do that? Oh, because then other kids are going to copy your example. Well, if other kids don't have similar working brains to me, again, it may not be a bad decision for me, but it may be a bad decision for those kids who are not weirdly mitigating their ADHD through rapid multitasking. So, yeah, I think it's hard. Like, I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, you can try to make decisions for other people, but, like, at the end of the day, like, you cannot determine whether making that decision is going to benefit them or not, because, like, you're not the one who's living in their reality. And I mean, it's a really hard thing, and I see it a lot. It's like parents really, and I think this is super common in US culture these days. It's like this helicopter parenting thing where, like, I'm going to control my child from making a mistake. And, you know, I think the thing too is, like, growing up within, like, the religious context I've grown up in, like, mistakes have a very negative, strong negative connotation. And I think that can be dangerous, because making a mistake doesn't have to be like this big grand, like, you majorly screwed up something in your life. It can just be like touching the hot stove, getting burned, and the burn goes away in a few days. So, you know, it could be anything. I don't even know. Like, I'm going to use, like, the dumbest example I could think of. My friend asked me to buy her some milk. I bought her whole milk. What if she wanted 2% milk? Well, now I learned that next time she's going to want the 2% and not the whole milk, because I learned from making that mistake. Again, not like a big mistake, okay? It's not the end of the world. You wasted, what, $3 because she doesn't want to drink the milk? It's a dumb example. But, like, it's just, like, it starts with very small examples. Like, people need to make mistakes so that they learn how to trust their own ability to correct their, let's say, course of action, so that they can move forward and make better decisions. So, you know, there's all that. And I think, you know, you can listen to different people and their experiences, but, like, it doesn't necessarily apply to you, because everybody's different. So I just think it's so hard. And, you know, people really, again, with this helicopter parenting thing, people really want to protect their kids. And I understand in some ways that it's motivated by love, but, like, every book out there on psychology and stuff is not going to tell you that it's actually good for the development of your kid, development and well-being of your child. So, I don't know. Like, I'm an adult child and I'm still going through this, so my heart goes out to all the kids who are dealing with this, like, who are not adults. So, yeah, it's rough, and that's why sometimes I think about running really far away and never coming back. And this is what I said. I was like, when I was in Finland, I was like, any mistake, poor decision, whatever that I did that was difficult, that screwed up my life, I alone was responsible for dealing with the consequences of that action. You were not around to, like, see any of it, and I don't know, like, I locked myself out of the house a few times. That's a mistake, right? Now I'll definitely check I haven't done that again for a while. So I'm just saying, there are all sorts of stupid things that you can do that are considered mistakes. It doesn't have to be the big grand mistake, but I think, yeah, it's just like, you have to let people make mistakes, because it's part of life. It's part of growth. It's a growth mindset, really. It's funny, I can feel my dog snoring. Wow, cool. Okay. So, that's everything. This is partially out of frustration, but yeah, that's the deal. So, I'm gonna go back to working now. For the Russian side of my channel, I'm gonna try to do my interview today. Like, I have to edit it and stuff. But, yep. So, as usual, make more mistakes. That's all I have to say. And if you're a parent, let your kid make more mistakes, because you can't learn without making mistakes. Alright, until next time. Bye.